last finance meeting, the purpose of this fund is to in part address one of the audit findings in which shared services have been allocated in the past. It also is intended to address the allocation of our IT costs across the city. At least last year and in the recent years past, most of IT from a personnel and a contract and even a software hardware standpoint, for the most part, have been paid out of the utility. And so with the establishment of these two funds, IT as an example, the entire budget is budgeted in this internal service fund. The only exception being equipment that we intend to continue to purchase out of the capital improvement fund. So this would contain the entire IT budget, and then that will be allocated as an IT charge back through the department, so everyone pays their fair share. And that's a similar approach on the other internal service fund for administrative services.
Okay. So, I know that you probably just said this, but for clarity for me, I was a little kind of confused. So in the sense that, so if you look at the budget here, it says personnel services, $549,000 for the internal service fund for the proposed budget. And then, so that...
Which page are you on?
I'm on page 2.
Page 2.
Of the...
Okay.
So whose salary is that?
So those salaries are all of the controller's office salaries. So it's 100% of every personnel in the controller's department. In the past, some of those, one position had been budgeted 50-50 water sewer, so you wouldn't have seen those dollars in a civil city budget. Other positions in the controller's office had been allocated a percentage to the utilities as well. So the portion of the budget that you're seeing on a comparison standpoint would have only included the percentage that was coming out of civil city. So as an example, I think my salary currently is paid 85%, I believe, out of civil city, 15% out of utilities. So that number in the 2016 revised budget, as an example, the 395, you would only be seeing 85% of my salary, 50% of the deputy's salary, 0 of the one position that's currently funded out of utilities, and then the same percentage for the other positions that are only paid out of civil city. That 549 number is 100% of all of those salaries, which will then be allocated as a charge to departments for administration.
All right, so 100% of controller's office staff. Okay, the next question that I had was, could you explain to us, I noticed you have some large amounts of money in the others.
And that is all IT related. So if you flip in this section to page 15, which is the IT breakdown. Mm-hmm. So that 710 consists of the contract for our IT services currently with Sondy Solutions, 100% of that. It also includes the contract for our New World System software, 100% of that. So any contractual obligations we have from an IT standpoint, that's 100% of that number.
Okay.
And like I said, in the past, the contract portions that we've had with IT have been paid 100% by utilities. Personnel was also paid that way. So if you flip back on this section to page 14, you'll see that there's no dollars budgeted for personnel outside of $15,000, which might be for some temporary help next year. So that's all down in the contract.
So, Controller, you said $710,000 is for all of the existing IT contracts.
Correct.
Okay. So So you put the 700. So let's just take IT. So I'm trying to understand this. So you put $710,000 is what's budgeted for IT, and then the utility uses some IT work. How does the money flow from utility to the internal service? They pay into the internal service fund, or
My intent for, yes, so my intent is there should be, if this budget for IT, as an example, the grand total is $818,000. So in this fund, there will be a charge to each department for IT services. In each department, you'll see in the rest of the budget, there is a line item for that charge. So then they will be billed monthly and pay this fund monthly, so that at the end of the year, this fund should have zero balance.
So
Whatever
how
the cost was is offset by the revenue.
So how did you calculate the amount that like each department was sending?
In order to establish a line item in the budgets for now, what I assumed was if your budget is 10% of the total, then you have a 10% charge.
that makes sense. And then the same thing is true here of legal. Which legal is this?
The only thing that's not in this legal is if there's a separate USB contract for legal services, that stays at USB. So this would be for, everything but that. So any legal services provided to the city through, current contract, whether it be city attorney, corporation counsel, that's not specific to the utility, would be in that number.
Okay, so it doesn't matter which contract. It's just the fund just pays the
Correct.
bill of that person. Okay. Counselors, do you have any questions on the fund?
And
I got another. I see one. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to reiterate when we met with our auditor from State Board earlier in the year to review the draft of the audit report, and we literally went through every finding. He kind of explained to us either what it was or what was going on. As we were discussing the allocation of shared services, from a State Board perspective, it's all about documentation and justification. And, we had this conversation with him on an internal service fund. In fact, he brought up the topic of an internal service fund. So we, said basically, it's one thing on just salaries, but if you take the controller's office as an example, everything we do, whether it be printing payroll checks, invoices, et cetera, really, if you get down to it, is all based upon usage from departments. And so that's kind of how this evolved.
I got a question for you too, Mr. Controller. And this is something I've noticed throughout the budget. You have very detailed outline of different things, line items. But I just keep noticing these large amounts of money in other, and it just, so then I don't know what it's for when I'm just looking at it. So like you got 439.020 other of 140 grand on page 5.
So that's the summary of the actual collective internal services funds. So if you scroll down to page 9, 100 of that is in the legal budget. And in essence, that's an estimate for any potential settlements we may have. Obviously, we don't have a known number on that, but that's what that number is.
Oh, it's the other in the. Okay, right. Okay, and I see what you're saying. That's a good thing. The 43920. Okay, that helps us categorize to show that it's the same. It's the same other.
And,
That's a good thing to note, right?
yes.
Like it's a, are you guys seeing that, counselors? Okay.
What's the, I mean, it's not a large increase, well, I don't know, it might be a large increase. From the, I gotta get back to it, employees' health insurance.
Which page?
It is, hold on, let me get back to it here. It's on page 2.
Page 2. So again, in the internal services funds, the only salary-related budget dollars are for the controller's office. And so that increase is predominantly due to the fact that it's 100% versus, say, 85% in my case, or 50% in another. So the same way the salaries were only budgeted a percentage that was coming out of Civil City, health insurance was paid the same way.
So you're saying if I take 80,000 times 15%, I should get somewhere around $101,972.
Roughly, and there are some changes in the premiums for next year. The employer's premium is down, the employer's share. The overall health premium, I believe, is going to be up about 3%, but the employer's portion of that is down, so there are some, that math would be close,
Okay.
probably wouldn't be exact.
Okay.
I'm sorry, yo. You see stuff in the summary, and then you try to find it in the actual, the actual breakdown, either in corporation council or. I see there's a. I can't find it in this place. There it is. Is that it? No. There's a $2,800 for organization memberships and dues, and I was trying to find it, like who needs.
It's probably a
$2,800.
combination of legal and controller's office.
$43908. Yeah, no, that's it right there in the summary. Let's see, I can't find
Should
it.
be, it's predominantly the controller's office, which would be GFOA, IACT, things along that line, our memberships.
Okay. The other question I have for the controller office, since I know we're going to be bringing department heads in later on in front of the full council, but this is kind of serve as kind of the internal. This seems to me like this internal service fund is mostly the controller's office. Do you plan on hiring any new people for 2017?
No.
How many employees do you have?
Let me clarify that. I'm not planning to hire any new full-time employees. We may have an intern or two next summer, but aside from that, no full-time employees.
How many employees do you have?
We have 6,
6.
including HR.
Do we handle all HR services in-house?
We do. Police and fire have some component of HR when they do new hiring, but as far as, benefits, anything that's HR related is 100% in-house.
So we don't contract anything out to anyone? All right. Okay, you guys, any questions on it?
I have 2 things just for the good of the committee. One, just a reminder, this ordinance just creates these funds, and it's good to talk about the budget numbers, but the ordinance we're looking at, just so we know, we're just seeking to create the funds, and we'll vote on what actually goes into the funds and how that budget comes about separately. And then number 2, there are a couple of typographical issues on Proposal 16 First one is in the 1, 2, 3, fourth whereas clause, there should be an and after the semicolon, and then in the fifth whereas clause, there should be a period at the end of fund, and as long as you are okay with Kathy making those changes, I don't see an amendment being necessary for those. Fourth whereas clause, after the semicolon, there should be an and then the fifth whereas clause, there should be a period.
And the end after the semicolon.
Yeah. And then a period at the end of the last one.
And I appreciate the council to keep us we got to digging into the budget, not so much about voting just on the
And
fund.
you should dig into the budget. I just want to make sure when you guys make a recommendation, we know it's just on the creation of the fund. Those are
Thank you.
all germane questions.
Okay, so, councilors, I would entertain a motion for recommendation of approval for the establishment of Internal Service Fund 701 and Administrative Service Fund 702 to full council. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second? All right, it has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you.
I wanted you to sit down and come back up.
Next we'll have Mr. Streeter.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
All right, Mr. Streeter, come on up. Proposal number 19 is the next thing on the agenda. It is the elected officials' salaries for 2017. Mr. Fenwick, could you please elaborate on that for us, please?
I guess I will categorize this as an it is what it is ordinance. The only change is in the clerk's salary, which we are requesting an increase of that for next year. Everything else remained the same.
All right, so for the record, there are no other elected officials getting any raises in this proposal besides the city clerk.
That's correct.
Okay, question I do have is I noticed that in this ordinance, the city clerk's salary would be raised to $70,850. What was the old ordinance?
Kathy could tell us.
I'm not sure what the actual old ordinance was, but the current salary is $65,000.
Okay,
I have a copy of it. Give me just a second. I'll tell you what it is.
well, 65, right? Because there's no range on.
I believe that's what it was.
I can tell you when the previous ordinance was adopted.
Oh.
Maybe.
2008.
I think, for your salary? 8.
Yeah, 2008 for 2000.
Yeah,
No.
the 2009.
The council took an increase in 2012.
Okay. All righty.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to send proposal number 19, 2016, elected officials' salaries for 2017 to full council.
Any second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. All right. Proposal number 21, establishing Fund 263, Rainy Day Restricted Fund, and authorizing a transfer from the Motor Vehicle Fund to Fund 263, Rainy Day Restricted Fund. Mr. Fenwick.
Yeah. This is related to the Community Crossroads grant for the matching grant funds for paving. So State Board of Accounts put out a memo right around the time that grant was announced, and it was kind of a Q&A, what can be used, for matching funds for that program. Obviously, we have the $660,000 already that the council has appropriated, which was the special COA distribution. So establishing this fund and then transferring MVH dollars to that is acceptable as the additional match. So this fund and this transfer gets us to the $1 million of the local match that's required under that Community Crossroads grant. So basically, it will allow us to do $2 million worth of paving, really starting now, and hopefully by the end of the year, early spring, those 14 road projects will be complete.
I just have one question. When can we expect to get the money from the state once we, give them the match or show that we have the money?
I don't have a specific answer for you yet on that, but I will get that and get that back to you.
Okay. All right, I would like to entertain a motion. Or do you have any questions?
I just wanted clarification on this, because I do vaguely remember. So they recommended that we create the rainy day fund?
Yep.
Okay, and that's just to keep it separate for tracking accounting
Absolutely.
purposes? Okay.
Yep.
The statute, I think, is a little bit more liberal in how you can pay for monies related to the grant, but the State Board of Accounts has come out with sort of an opinion on, we'd like to see the money put here or there so that it's separate.
Okay.
I'd like to entertain a motion.
Second.
A motion to establish the Fund 263 Rainy Day Restricted Fund, authorizing the transfer of MVH Fund to Fund 263 Rainy Day Restricted Fund. So you said second, Councilor Freeman. All right. All in favor? Motion carries. Proposal number 22, establishing Fund 825, a trust fund and other post-employment benefits.
So this proposal, we're requesting to establish a trust fund. This trust fund would only be allowed for post-employment benefits, specifically any accrued time that an employee has earned could be paid from this fund and retirees' health insurance. The impetus for wanting to establish this fund is, at least in the last several years, including this year, when we've had, in particular, a police or fire employee retire, we've experienced pretty significant payouts for time off. The most recent one we had, which I believe was 6 weeks ago, was right around $100,000. We have 20 public safety personnel who currently could retire today, and if they all retired today, we would owe $1 million. Obviously, they're not all going to retire today, but that's a fraction of the liability we have right now. So my goal with establishing this trust was, one, to get it in place, and then two, I believe it's prudent for the city to require the controller, whomever that may be, each December to come before the council and, one, give a status update on not only the fund, but the liabilities, and then two, request an amount to be transferred to that fund on an annual basis.
So what is the accrued time policy?
It's, I don't have the specifics for you, but in a nutshell, there's sick time, there's vacation time, there's holiday time, there's a lot of time that goes into that. It's been a policy of the cities for many years. There's a limit of the amounts you can carry forward, but obviously given the numbers that we're on the hook for, it's a pretty healthy number. I can give you a complete exact numbers in terms of what those accrual limits are. I don't have those off the top of my head, but.
And it's all city employees can?
There are differences for police and fire personnel versus civilian employees. So the biggest liability we have is with police and fire, but we do have a similar liability for civilian employees, but they're not allowed to carry as much, time going forward.
And have we thought about doing like buyouts?
I think, in my opinion, everything should be on the table in terms of how we address this. So it's something that we're still, I'd say, exploring what our options are because of, I think there are some FLSA, differences for police and fire personnel than, say, civilians. So I don't want to run afoul of any, federal law in this regard. So it's going to take some time from I believe, a legal standpoint for us to, know what we can or cannot do. But yes, I think we do need to consider that everything's on the table to address this.
How much money do we plan to transfer into the trust to get it started?
My goal for this year would be to transfer $100,000 if we can.
And we're transferring it from where?
Well, why I chose December and for the controller to give a report is because, one, I want to make sure, while we need to address this, I don't want to, address it despite everything else. So I believe with underspending, we should be able to transfer some funds. The goal is $100,000 and do that most likely from the general fund.
So like when the person that you had to pay out the $100,000 to, that came out of the general.
It did. And we had 3 of those this year.
So I don't remember us doing an appropriation to pay that. So it was already in the budget or something?
Well, that's my concern is it was not in terms of there wasn't, and you'll see some numbers in this year's budget for that. But in the personal services line items, there's your favorite, another, where the payouts have occurred. Right now, I feel okay that we have enough appropriation for the balance of the year in those particular departments to continue to pay the salaries and insurance and everything else that's in there. So I believe we're okay for this year, but you're absolutely right. It wasn't budgeted. It could have been an issue where, come October, I'd have to come here and say, hey, we're out of money, and here's why, for these 3 payouts, to be able to continue to pay salaries for the balance of the year.
So are you projecting your budget based on knowledge of pending retirements, or what is it based on?
For next year,
Uh-huh.
I did ask department heads of any known retirements. Obviously, if an individual hasn't said, hey, I'm retiring, we can't.
Right.
So of known retirements, and then I kind of guessed that maybe we might get 1 or 2 more. Unfortunately, that's the best I could do. So it was, I tried to get as many known ones that I could. But, sometimes I think, that's a game time decision for some
Yeah,
folks, so.
okay.
Have you guys talked to our city council or corporation council to get an opinion on this fairly quickly?
Have, as far as opinion, in what regard?
Related to the policy, the time policy.
We have had discussions, but as far as like having a definitive answer on whether, what and how we can change policy, no, I don't have that yet. The other, I guess, maybe to not get off topic, but another reason I wanted to establish this fund is there has been some movement with the state legislature in the last 2 sessions requiring government entities in Indiana to do more GASB reporting. Right now, we're on a cash basis. So as we move towards GASB, which I believe is going to happen, it may not happen in the next, say, 2 or 3 years, but personally, I think within the next 5 it will. So as we move toward GASB, then all of these liabilities will come on to the books of the city. And so the next step after that will be, what are you doing to address those liabilities? So I think we will be ahead of that game with this. So that was another, reason for wanting to establish it now.
So the only mechanism to add funds to this is the general fund. We don't have any other ideas of how we could get.
To me, that's for this year. And as we move forward and we get, I've been working on it, I just don't, wanted to get the fund established, but as we go down by departments and see what each liability is in each department, I think in the future, then we can say, if utilities liability is X, then utility needs to contribute something to the fund. All the other personnel funded funds will eventually, I think, get there.
Okay.
So no, it won't be completely borne by general fund indefinitely.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Counselors, I'd like to entertain a motion. Would like to entertain a motion to establish Fund 825, Trust Fund, and other post-employment benefits.
Second?
Okay, we have a second. All in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Any other concerns from the counselors?
I would just like to make sure that we get, establish whether or not we need a finance committee meeting for next week, and if so, if we need any department heads there.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to need a meeting for very soon. I'm not 100% sure if it's next week or the week after, but we're going to need one very soon to address those other 17, 18, and 20. How long do we have to?
So the schedule that that you adopted at your last council meeting will have the ordinance, the budget ordinance published in time for an October 3rd public hearing. When are you
The 19th.
going to the 19th, right, to publish that? So if you want to have any thoughts on it before that, which you can publish what's been presented right now and you guys just cut it. But if you want to have any input on that, then you want to have a meeting before then. Otherwise, in terms of following just the adoption schedule, there's nothing that says you have to be anywhere except for just presenting a budget for public hearing on the 3rd, but your adoption is going to be the mid-month meeting, which is October 19th, I believe.
I think we need to schedule a meeting for next week. If we don't need it, but I think we need to schedule one for next week for council as a whole,
Committee of the Whole.
the committee on whole, yes.
Right. So that's something that will be done by council chair, right?
Sure.
But not-
I think this council can make a recommendation to the president who's here tonight that you'd like to see that done and let the president determine if he can get a quorum together next week for a committee of the whole.
Okay. So we would like to make a recommendation to the council president to have a committee of the whole meeting. And at that meeting, we'd like to have the department heads there to discuss the budget and their needs and stuff in their department. And so Councilor Williams will be getting with the controller's office about dates and times, I guess, related to that.
If I can offer one caveat in there, you might just want to have the president coordinate with the controller on which department heads could be available for a meeting, because if we have them all come, we'll probably be here till
We don't.
Right.
2 or 3 in the
Well,
morning, and you could do the budget in little bite sizes rather than trying to do it all at once.
Right, but as far as, but we're also going to need a finance meeting to deal with the other proposals, and
You will need a finance committee meeting for 17, 18, and 20.
right, for 17, 18, and 20. We'd like to get that scheduled as well, and with that meeting, let's work with the control, we'll give you a call, I'll give you a call, and we'll get something on the calendar, and
Can I
I'll
make
get
a
with Kathy.
suggestion on next week if we do get a meeting scheduled for the committee as a whole? That from a departmental standpoint, I would recommend we have police, fire, parks, and streets. Streets, I would say, is combined DPW streets. Those would be the biggest ones. Obviously, if there are any other departments there are questions on, I think we could address those at a different time, because most of the others, I believe, are pretty straightforward.
Well, the controller's office is a big boy now.
We just talked about it.
I think maybe it might be good though for the other, because of the change with the Internal Service Fund and how we're doing it. I think it might be a good idea too to discuss that with the committee as a whole as well. All right.
Mr. Chair.
Motion for adjournment.
I have
Oh.
a question.
Oh.
Have we established a tax rate levy yet?
Yes, we're only permitted to go so high. We have a maximum levy, which we're currently there now, and so the state put out the growth quotient for next year, which was a 3.8% increase. So the levy we currently have will go up by 3.8%. It can't go any higher. So that's what the levy proposal for next year is. In terms of the dollar amount, roughly speaking, I don't,
So right now, we're at 2.74, so,
as the tax rate? Yes, and Lawrence's portion of that, I want to say, is like 86 cents. So we would be roughly still in that range for Lawrence with that levy growth. But we, really don't have any control over that other than saying we're going to go up 3.8 and is what it is.
good.
Just a reminder, whenever we post these meetings, I need 48 hours notice by the opening of the law.
All right. Motion for adjournment? All right, adjourn.